The first night the millionaire's daughters couldn't sleep, the house noticed before the people did, because silence has a sound when it stretches too long, and in that mansion silence had always been expensive and controlled, never restless, never afraid. The girls lay awake in their massive beds beneath silk sheets that felt colder every night, staring at ceilings painted with angels who never blinked, listening to the clocks tick in different rooms like separate hearts that refused to synchronize. Isabella was 10, thoughtful and quiet, her mind always wandering into questions no one had time to answer, while Sofia was 8, sharper, quicker to speak, quicker to cry, and quicker to pretend she wasn't afraid. Their father, Victor Moriau, was a man whose name appeared in magazines beside words like visionary, ruthless, genius, a man who bought companies the way others bought groceries, yet lately he had begun to lose battles he didn't understand, because no amount of money could force sleep into his daughter's eyes. Doctors came with white coats and practiced smiles, psychologists whispered about anxiety and adjustment, nutritionists blamed sugar and screens, spiritual advisors suggested blessings and incense, but every night ended the same way, with two small figures curled under blankets, eyes wide open, hearts racing at shadows that seemed to move when no one was watching. Victor would stand at the doorway, his presence filling the room like authority itself, and promise them they were safe, that nothing in the world could hurt them, yet the moment he turned away, the fear returned, heavier, sicker, like a fog that refused to lift. What frightened him most wasn't the insomnia, but the way their laughter had slowly disappeared, replaced by silence that felt older than the house itself. The maid arrived quietly, as poor people often do, without announcement, without expectation, without anyone noticing how much space they carried inside them. Her name was Elena, though for weeks no one bothered to learn it, referring to her simply as the new girl or the maid, a woman in her early 30s with tired eyes and hands roughened by work that never paid enough. She had come from a small town where nights were dark and honest, where sleep came easily because exhaustion left no room for fear, and she carried with her a calm that couldn't be bought or taught. Elena noticed things others missed, like the way Isabella's fingers twisted the sheets when she thought no one was watching, or how Sofia flinched at sudden sounds, or how the house itself seemed to sigh after midnight, as if remembering something it wished it could forget. On her third night of work, while polishing the hallway floor long after the family had gone to bed, she heard a soft sound drifting from behind one of the doors, not quite crying, not quite breathing, but something in between, something fragile. She paused, mop in hand, knowing the rules clearly stated she was not to disturb the children after hours, knowing she could be fired for crossing boundaries, yet something inside her, something older than fear of losing a job, guided her forward. Inside the room, the girls lay awake together, Sofia clutching Isabella's arm as if sleep itself might steal her away, their eyes reflecting moonlight like startled animals. Elena didn't speak at first. She didn't turn on lights or ask questions or offer solutions. She simply sat on the floor, her back against the wall, and breathed slowly, deeply, as if reminding the room how to be still. Minutes passed. The clocks kept ticking. The girls watched her, confused by this woman who didn't rush, didn't demand, didn't perform concern. Finally, Sofia whispered, "We can't sleep." Elena nodded gently, as though this was the most ordinary truth in the world. "Sometimes," she said softly, "sleep is shy. The more you chase it, the faster it runs." Isabella frowned. "But it's been running for weeks." Elena smiled, not proudly, but kindly. "Then maybe it's not running," she said. "Maybe it's waiting for something." That was the first night the girls closed their eyes without realizing it, not because fear vanished, but because for the first time, someone had sat with them inside it instead of trying to pull them out. The next morning, Victor was informed with disbelief that his daughters had slept for nearly 3 hours straight, the longest stretch in over a month. He wanted explanations, charts, reasons he could measure, but none were offered, only a simple comment from a night guard who mentioned seeing the maid sitting outside the girls' room for hours. Victor dismissed it as coincidence, because men like him did not believe in coincidence when money was involved, yet something unsettled him, a small crack in his certainty. Over the following nights, the pattern continued. Elena never announced herself, never insisted, never claimed credit. She would simply sit nearby, sometimes humming a tune so old it had no words, sometimes telling stories so quiet they felt like secrets meant only for the dark. The stories weren't about princesses or heroes or wealth, they were about small villages, about storms that passed, about people who survived by helping one another, about nights when fear arrived but didn't they stay because it was treated like a guest instead of an enemy. The girls listened, and slowly, their breathing changed. Slowly, sleep returned, not perfectly, not completely, but enough to bring color back into their cheeks and curiosity back into their voices. Victor watched from a distance, torn between gratitude and suspicion. He began reviewing Elena's file, expecting to find something impressive or alarming, but it was painfully ordinary, a list of cleaning jobs, references from people who barely remembered her name, no degrees, no certifications, nothing that explained the change she had brought into his home. One evening, he confronted her, his tone polite but edged with authority. "What are you doing with my daughters?" he asked. Elena met his gaze without fear. "Nothing special," she replied. "I'm just listening." Victor frowned it. "Listening to what?" She gestured gently toward the hallway. "To what they don't know how to say yet." That answer irritated him more than any demand would have, because it offered no control, no transaction, no leverage. It dismissed her, yet that night he stood outside his daughter's room longer than usual, listening to their laughter drift into the hallway, unfamiliar and precious, and for the first time in years, he felt like a guest in his own home. As the days passed, the girls began asking for Elena by name, their voices bright with anticipation when evening approached. Isabella started leaving small notes on the nightstand, questions about dreams and fears and whether people could miss things they never had. Sofia drew pictures of 3 figures under the moon, labeling them simply Uesi. Victor noticed these changes the way a businessman notices shifts in a market, cautiously, analytically, yet unease followed him everywhere, because he couldn't shake the feeling that something important was happening without his permission. One night, unable to resist, he listened from behind the door as Elena told a story about a candle that believed it was too small to make a difference, until one night it was the only light left in the room. "The candle didn't chase the darkness," Elena whispered. "It just stayed lit." Victor felt something tighten in his chest, a sensation he hadn't felt since childhood, when his own mother had sat beside him during nights filled with hunger and uncertainty, before ambition taught him to outrun memory. That night, the girls slept peacefully, their faces soft, their hands relaxed, and Victor realized with a jolt that for weeks he had been trying to fix their fear instead of understanding it. Elena had done neither, she had simply respected it. The realization unsettled him more than any financial risk ever had. He began to wonder what else in his life he had tried to conquer instead of listen to, what else he had silenced instead of stayed with. In the quiet hours before dawn, the mansion felt different, less like a fortress and more like a home learning how to breathe again, and Victor stood alone in the hallway, facing a truth he couldn't buy or negotiate, that sometimes the poorest hands carry the richest wisdom, and sometimes the smallest presence can change everything without asking permission. And if this story is already touching something inside you, if you feel that quiet shift the way Victor did, remember that stories like this don't end here, they grow with every chapter, every lesson, every moment we choose empathy over power. So make sure you subscribe to the channel and stay with us, because what Elena carries into that house has only just begun to reveal itself, and chapter those will change everything you think you know about wealth, fear, and the true meaning of rest. The change did not arrive suddenly, like a storm announcing itself with thunder, but slowly, like dawn slipping through heavy curtains. And Victor Moreau did not notice it at first because he had spent his entire life believing that change only mattered when it was loud, measurable, and profitable. The nights grew quieter, not empty, but calm, and the girls began waking with stories of dreams instead of complaints of fear, Isabella describing places where she walked through endless libraries made of light, Sofia laughing about flying over oceans with shoes that glowed, and Victor listened with polite smiles while something unfamiliar stirred inside him, something dangerously close to hope. Elena continued her work as she always had, scrubbing floors, folding sheets, moving through the mansion like a shadow that left warmth behind instead of cold, never reminding anyone of what she had done, never claiming ownership of the peace that had begun to settle into the walls. Yet the house remembered. Houses always do. They absorb the emotions of those who live within them, and this one, long accustomed to ambition and silence, was learning a new language, one spoken softly, patiently, without demand. One evening, as rain pressed gently against the windows, Victor found himself unable to focus on his work.